Were not for the weather, Susie, my little unwelcome face would come peering in today. I should steal a kiss from the sister the darling rover returned. Thank the wintry wind, my dear one, that spares such daring intrusion. Dear Susie, happy Susie, I rejoice to all your joy, sustained by that dear sister, you will never again be lonely. Don't forget all the little friends who have tried so hard to be sisters, who you indeed, when you were indeed alone, when you indeed were alone. Well, when indeed you were alone. You do not hear the wind blown on this inclement day when the world is shrugging its shoulders. Your little Clumbarian inlined with warmth and softness. There is no silence there. So you offer from Bonnie Al- Alice. I miss one angel face in a little world of sisters. Dear Mary, sainted Mary, remember, lonely one, though she comes not to us, we shall return to her. My love to both your sisters, and I want so much to see Mary. Very all yours, Emily. This letter that I've just read to you was written by one of America's most famous poets, Emily Dickinson. It is one of 300 letters that she wrote to her sister-in-law, in fact. And they shared what many historians would now call a romantic friendship. This is an idea that was very common in the 17th, 18th, and even 19th century, where two people of the same gender, usually two women, but two men got into it too from time to time, would share a deep emotional connection with each other. Because the idea was very much at the time that men had a very specific world they belonged to: business and politics and finances. They didn't relate to women the way they related to other men. And the same thing for women. So if they wanted a romantic relationship, not necessarily a physical one, there's certainly evidence that some of these pairings were physical as well as emotional, but not all of them. And the thing is, but they in every other sense had a romantic relationship. This wasn't seen as strange. This wasn't seen as unhealthy. This was a social norm throughout the 19th century. Because again, you related better with your own gender. Your concerns and gender, a member of your own gender's concerns related more strongly than they would with someone of the opposite gender. So sex and physicality was for men and women because that's how you made babies. But romance, love, things like that, you do with another woman or another man. We see this in Emily Dickinson's letters with her sister-in-law, who was married to Emily's brother, but Susan Gilbert, who had married Austin Dickinson. Um, and the marriage between the two of them, Susan and Austin, was never a particularly good one. But the two women had a very close relationship. And again, over 300 letters sent from Emily Dickinson to this Susan Gilbert. I'm not going to claim, and let's be clear when I talk about this subject. I'm not going to claim I know for certain if any of the people I'm speaking about were heterosexual or bisexual or homosexual. Um, I can't say. But there's definitely an emotional attachment, and you can see in the descriptions. I will provide links to some of those letters from the University of Pennsylvania. If this was written between a man and a woman, you'd think they were courting. But in theory, they weren't ever looking to have a romantic relationship. You want another example of this? A male on male example, for example, maybe. How about a president of the United States? Abraham Lincoln had a lifelong friend named Joshua Speed. Um, Historians currently debate if it was actually a homosexual relationship, but there's certainly good evidence it was what historians now call a romantic friendship. The two men lived together for 4 years. They shared a bed together. Um, this isn't unusual at the time. Men often shared beds for financial reasons in the 19th century. But again, this idea of two men who lived closely together, had a strong emotional relationship with each other, shared a bed together, was quite normal at one time. We see some distancing between them later once Abraham marries, of course, Mary Todd. But again, there seems to be an emotional relationship there. And you can go further back. There are other examples among the founding fathers and even in history. But the other thing that you see start to develop in the 19th century that I find particularly interesting is what's now called the Boston marriage. Now, the idea, even now, is probably relatively acceptable, but there was a time where it wasn't. But the idea is that two women, usually older women, would get together, live together, and to share, again, not supposed to be a sexual thing, just a financial thing, to share financial burdens and um, for social support and things of that nature. But two women would live together, and it was so normalized, it was called the Boston marriage, specifically named after a book that was written in it's the late 19th century called The Bostonians, which normalized this kind of relationship where two women lived together. It was seen in a number of important historical figures. For example, Sarah Orne Jewett and Annie Adams Fields. Jewett was a novelist, and Fields was the widow of a prominent publisher. They lived together for over 30 years, splitting time between Beacon Hill in Boston and South Berwick in Maine. Um, and again, this was very normal. This was very socially acceptable. The idea that it was scandalous wouldn't come until much later. Two women living together for practical reasons, and I'm not going to say again. I don't know. I wasn't um, Annie Fields, nor was I Sarah Jewett, for example. So I don't know if it was what was there, if it was romantic, if it was sexual, it was purely practical. But I think it's fair to say that most of these relationships were more than platonic. And this was very typical. And I think this is a good episode for my first full episode, given that it is currently Pride Month. I'm not trying to argue that lesbianism or homosexuality in general was prominent in any of these figures. It was taboo enough at the time that we're not going to find like a detailed sexual account, even if it happened between any of these people. But try to remember the next time you hear about this kind of relationship that the idea of having one is much older than the idea that doing so is inappropriate. I hope you enjoyed this little tidbit. As always, you will find links to peer reviewed sources in my description. If you think I got something wrong, and I wouldn't be surprised if I did, I'm not perfect, please let me know. Leave a comment, shoot me an email. Email is also in the description. Again, as I said in my intro video, and I'll say it every other time since, bring your receipts. I provide peer reviewed sources, not just my own opinions, in every description. I get things wrong for sure. The sources I cite get things wrong. Again, for certain. But bring your own peer-reviewed sources. Counter my arguments with better sourced arguments. And that way we can all learn together. That's going to do it for this episode of Woke History. And remember, folks, study your history. Have a good night.